Cyril Ramaphosa announced 10 changes to his cabinet recently, including the appointment of close political ally Enoch Godongwana as his new finance minister. Godongwana succeeds Tito Mboweni, who had held the post since 2018 and was a strong proponent of reining in the government debt and the wage bill. The new finance chief has been an advocate of an investor-friendly policy environment. He's cautioned against proposals by the ruling African National Congress to nationalize the central bank, as well as proposals to change the constitution to make it easier to seize land without compensation. So the big task now is for the new finance minister to try and progress the slow economic reforms to get the economy growing again and really to get a handle on the state of this economic recovery. I'm joined now by Shergeran Naidoo, who is head of stakeholder engagements at BankservAfrica, and they really are plugged into the payments ecosystem, so they can give us all the insights into what's happening to wages and pensions and take-home salaries and all of that good data. Shergeran, welcome to the show. The latest BankservAfrica Take-home Pay Index shows that salaries and wages in South Africa are actually slowly returning to pre-pandemic levels, but clearly the impact of the third wave is likely to reflect in the data in the coming months. What are you expecting to see?
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. With regards to the take-home pay index, we found that there has been a slight reduction on a year-on-year basis, but nevertheless, there's been an 11% uptick in salary payments through the system. This is based on the data compared to last year's figures. Now, we all know what last year was like, so that doesn't really say much when you're actually comparing this data to what happened last year. Nevertheless, the fact that there had been a marginal decline in terms of 0.5% tells us that in terms of the actual average take-home pay salary, that this was actually more of a mathematical result because more people have come into the system.
Right.
Last year, this time, there was the daily and the weekly salaried earners most of them were out the system. As we've gone back in through this last year, there has been an improvement in the numbers. Mostly the monthly paid salary earners were almost back to normal, but it's taken a much longer time for the weekly and the daily salary people to come into the system. So this is more of a mathematical element as opposed to anything else.
That certainly accords with other data, other research that we've seen from the NIDS-CRAM survey. It really is at that low end. If you're a more casual or weekly type income earner, it's been a very, very difficult period for you, and also feeds into the narrative that we've been hearing about a K-shaped recovery. You know, if you are a monthly take-home salary type earner, then you've tended to be a lot more resilient through this pandemic than those at the bottom leg of the K. You also produce the BankServ Economic Transactions Index, the BETI. And I often chat to Mike Schisler on the program about the BETI. What does it tell us about the state of the economy at the moment?
So the BETI itself has demonstrated that we've certainly had a rebound. Once again, compared this time to this figures to last year, but on a month-on-month basis, it's actually started to flatten out. So certainly on a quarterly basis and on an annual basis, the increases have been much more dramatic. But on a month-on-month basis, from June to May, there's actually been a slight decline. But that's only because May of last year had rebounded by such a dramatic amount in comparison to, or May of this year had rebounded by such a dramatic amount to May of last year, because of course April and May were the major periods in which we'd had the shutdown. Something that had occurred to me when you'd asked the question though about the take-home pay was that even though there had been that marginal difference between this and last year, when you're comparing it to 2 and 3 and 4 years ago, there's actually been quite a material decline in terms of average take-home salary. So that tells us that even though we've improved relative to last year on an 11% basis, when you're comparing it to the 2 and 3-year periods, it's actually lower than those numbers. So we've actually been stagnating. That's something that was quite telling.
And telling in an environment where we're seeing the cost of living increasing as well. I mean, fuel hikes, we're currently paying a record 18 Rand 20 for petrol inland, food price increases well above inflation, electricity well above inflation. And to see that needle on take-home pay actually stagnating over the last few years, that really should be a concern. But what do the numbers tell us if you dive a little bit into that?
So if you find that the actual averaged take-home pay salaried earner in this period has experienced that decline and that reduction in real amounts, and if you're comparing that to what's happened with the declines in the period with the lockdown. Certain sectors of the economy, even though when we started this period, this level 2, level 3, and level 4 in these past few weeks, we found that consumer expenditure in this period has declined. So from the time that we've gone into this new level lockdown to address this the third wave, there's been about an approximate 5.2% decline in consumer expenditure. If you factor in also the complexities of the rioting and the looting that's also happened in this period, consumers' confidence had also taken a knock. In that period, you'd had almost a 5% decline when you're comparing it to 2 years back in terms of consumer expenditure. So that in itself is going to have a ripple effect on the economic activity. So your Betty and all of the other indicators that actually talk to the health of the economy, in as much as we've been having that staggered uptake and that rebound, notwithstanding it's at a K as opposed to a linear growth, we're gonna have a drop probably in the months to come. Maybe at least in the July numbers will demonstrate that there's been a decline in confidence. And it's been because of these factors such as the lockdowns, your load shedding as well. So load shedding had also come into play, which would have had an impact on the economic activity. And then you factor in the activities of the rioting and the looting that's also impacted activity.
I suppose the big question here to discern whether or not this is merely a decline in confidence, and when consumers are not confident, they're not going to go out and spend, or whether or not this is a structural decline in that they just don't have that extra money at the end of the month to go out and spend. And whether or not this might reflect in consumers, if they're not spending, at least shoring up their household balance sheets and saving a bit more. My sense, and given what you said earlier about the declining take-home pay, is that we just have increasingly less money to go out and spend. What is your sense on what's behind this?
Michael, I think you've covered it across the spectrum with everything you've just mentioned there. It's probably a mix of the stagnation that I spoke about earlier in terms of the real take-home pay increases, as well as structural issues, issues related to companies that have been adversely affected by the lockdown and by what we've been experiencing. Remember that one of the comments that Mr. Gonongwana had mentioned and stated earlier in the year was that we can't tax ourselves out of the economic distress that we're in, right? So that speaks to the real structural inefficiencies and structural issues that we've been facing as a nation. Even prior to the lockdown, we can't forget that we were actually, we for all intents and purposes, South Africa had already been in trouble, right?
Yeah.
All that the lockdown had done, and then the pandemic, was it shone a light on the issues, on the economic issues that we're facing as a nation. And whatever we've been going through right now has been shown up. So government, with regards to the TERS funding, the SRD, the special relief grants that have been provided, all of those have been almost artificially supporting the economy, artificially supporting the taxpayer. And to go forward, if we had to try and now to actually put more pressure on that very small tax base to try and make up for this empty kitty that we've got, that will actually be a real issue for the economy. So it will really require more structural implementation, structural policies or infrastructure policies that are going to actually allow us to grow as a nation.
Absolutely. Those are the slow economic reforms that I mentioned in my introduction, that the finance minister has some role in effecting, but really it's a broad cabinet issue. Why are we still here waiting for spectrum to be released? Why does it take so long to reform the energy system when it's a crisis? We need to see government moving with a bit of speed and a bit of urgency. Shergeran, we're going to have to leave it there. Fascinating chatting to you. I'm going to have to invite you back onto the show for us to take a deeper tour through the world of payments, because I do know South Africa has some of the finest financial services, fintech, insurtech brains anywhere in the world. I was chatting to the CEO of Pineapple recently, and he says when he's at global conferences, South Africa is held up as a global leader. So I'm sure there's some fantastic stuff we're doing at the coalface of payments. Shergeran Naidoo, Head of Stakeholder Engagements at BankservAfrica. I hope to chat to you soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, Michael. Thank you.